Just on the UN Security Council vote this morning, your allies, France, which has hostages held in Gaza, and the UK both said the resolution firmly calls for the release of hostages. And to most people reading it, there's little difference between this language and what you abstained on in March. So why did the US feel the need to block the resolution?
This resolution did contain a call for the release of hostages. What was defective about it?
The defective is that they were not linked. We believe it's important that you get a ceasefire. You get a ceasefire that secures the release of hostages. And we proposed a number of different formulations that would link the two, and that would call for a ceasefire that includes the release of hostages. And I don't understand. Hold on. Let me just say, I don't understand what could be objectionable about that language.
Well, right. Well, no, but I guess the point is that other people don't understand what could be objectionable about the language that you just vetoed.
What is objectionable to us is that it calls for Israel
an immediate ceasefire and the immediate release.
It calls for an immediate ceasefire, and we don't think that Hamas. Because let's be clear about when people talk about an immediate ceasefire, what they mean is they mean for Israel to immediately stop fighting. You think Hamas is going to respect a UN Security Council resolution calling for the release of hostages? All right. Good afternoon. Matt, kick us off.
You got nothing?
I had nothing to start with.
Okay.
What do you say?
All right. Well, let's start with Ukraine today. The security alert put out by the embassy. First off, can you be more specific as to what led to that?
So you're right. You saw the security alert that went out early this morning, overnight our time. The embassy put that alert out based on a possible threat of a significant attack on Kyiv, something that we take very seriously and led to the temporary change in posture at the embassy. We expect the embassy to return to normal operations tomorrow. I can't get into obviously the specifics of the threat, but it's something that we always monitor closely. We take the safety and security of our personnel it's very important to us. We take it extremely seriously, and that's what led to the change in posture today, and we expect it to resume normal operations tomorrow.
Okay, well, did this threat materialize, given the time there now? It's after dark now.
So I'm not aware of any significant strikes that have happened yet today in Kyiv, though, as you know, Ukraine has been the subject of incredibly tragically significant strikes over the last few days, and there's always a threat to more strikes. We base our security posture based on the best assessments we make of all the information available to us, and try to be incredibly cautious to protect our personnel.
All right, and it didn't actually result in the reduction of any staff, right?
No one has left Ukraine as a result of this. There were just people that were going to come into the office that didn't come into the office today, and we expect them to come in tomorrow.
Okay, and then on the landmine decision, what can you tell us about that?
So I can confirm, as you heard the Secretary of Defense speak to earlier today, that we are providing the Ukrainian government with non-persistent anti-personnel landmines. We have been providing them with anti-tank landmines for some time, but this is the first time we are providing them with anti-personnel landmines. There are a few things that I think are important to note about this new provision of equipment to the Ukrainians. One is that, as you have heard the Secretary say many times, we always adapt and adjust our policies based on real-world events. And the real-world events that we have seen are Russian advances, specifically Russian infantry advances in eastern Ukraine. And these non-persistent anti-personnel landmines are designed to blunt those types of infantry advances. They are very different from the landmines that the Russians have deployed and that you have seen other militaries, including our own military, deployed decades ago. The landmines that the Russians have deployed in Ukraine, and there are somewhere around 2 million landmines that the Russians have deployed, will remain a threat for decades, can go off at any time and harm not just soldiers, but civilians, and will long outlast the conflict. These What that means is they are battery powered, and they have a battery, and they can be set. The battery will expire somewhere between 4 hours and 2 weeks, at the most 2 weeks from when they are deployed. So the landmines will be deployed, and then within 2 weeks, if they have not been detonated, they become inert. So they will not pose a threat to the civilian population at the end of the conflict. Now, that said, they also have a high metal content, so they're easy to detect and easy to remove. And we know Ukraine is going to have to conduct an operation at the end of the conflict to remove unexploded ordnance already, both from the 2 million landmines that Russia has deployed, as well as other unexploded ordnance. They have already been conducting that type of operation in some of the territory that they have recaptured, and the United States is committed to provide them $284 million to support those efforts. Daphne, go ahead.
The Ukraine has said that Russia was trying to sow panic by circulating fake online messages about a massive looming missile and drone attack. Was the temporary change in posture of the embassy a result of those messages online, or was there something more that the U.S.
I'm not going to speak to the information that we rely on to make our security assessments, but we always base those assessments on a broad range of factors, and we look at a number of sources of information, including open source information, including intelligence information that we have, including information that we get from our partners. And we make the best decisions possible in real time to try to protect our personnel, and we'll continue to do that.
Okay, and then Ukraine has reportedly fired a volley of British Storm Shadow cruise missiles into Russia today. Do you have any information on this? Was the U.S. given a heads up?
I can't speak to that. I can't confirm it. Alex, go ahead. I'll come to you next, Jane.
Clarify about what you know. Kyiv has been under attack, missiles, drones, for weeks or months, and recently, last week. So what new do you know?
What do you mean, what new do I know?
What is triggering you to take further steps? What's different than Kyiv, what Kyiv has been seeing last week?
So as you heard me say in response to Matt's question and in response to Daphne's question, we receive and look at security information from a number of sources and look at potential threats from a number of sources. We obviously don't disclose those publicly, not productive for us to do so. We had specific information that led to us to make this decision, but I'm not going to get into disclosing that here for obvious security reasons. But, and I don't think this should be a controversial statement, we have no higher priority than the protection of the Americans who work in our embassy, and we are going to continue to put their safety first.
And it appears other embassies in Kyiv, Italy, Greek, and Spain, Spanish embassies also are not operating today. Is there any coordinated effort?
I will let those embassies speak to their operations.
And what about American citizens living in Kyiv? Do you have any call on them?
We have Kyiv is a do not travel area for American citizens. We have long said that American citizens should not travel to Kyiv. That advice has not changed.
Thank you. Please come back to me later on South Caucasus.
Okay.
Can I just follow up on the use of UK supplied Storm Shadow missiles?
Sure.
Is Ukraine discussing or consulting or informing the US of use of missiles provided by the UK or the US?
So we consult with the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian military, about a broad range of tactics that they can use to defend themselves, but I'm not going to speak publicly to the use of another country's weapons, not U.S. provided weapons. I will defer to the governments of Ukraine and the UK to speak to that.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, there are also reports that the US is thought to have provided navigational information for the use of those missiles. Can you confirm that?
No, I'm not going to speak to that at all.
Can you give us a readout of John Bass's meeting with the Ukrainian foreign minister yesterday? Who called for this meeting? What was the purpose?
The Ukrainian foreign minister was in town, as you know, so the secretary saw the Ukrainian foreign minister last week when he was in Brussels, had a conversation with him about what we are prepared to do to ensure that Ukraine is positioned for success on the battlefield in 2025, how we can continue to support them, updated him on some very concrete steps that we are taking. And I think I'll leave it at that. The Ukrainian foreign minister was then in town yesterday. The secretary was not here. As you know, he was traveling back from the G20 in Rio. So John Bass took that meeting. but it was to continue those discussions about how we can support Ukraine militarily and how we can support them diplomatically.
Can I switch to the Middle East?
Sure.
Can we just say on Ukraine
Yeah.
for one thing? Are you aware of this?
No,
notice?
you can't. I was saying no to Jenny. You can't. So you
Sorry,
can't.
this will be really quick, but are you aware of a notification in Congress going up saying that you're going to cancel half of Ukraine's debt? About 4.65 billion?
I am, and if you recall, when Congress passed the supplemental appropriations bill back in April, I think, forgetting exactly when, it contained a provision for us that allowed us to provide a certain amount of economic assistance to Ukraine, and some of that economic assistance was provided in the form of loans, and we had the option under the bill to cancel those loans at our discretion, and then Congress has the option to pass a resolution of disapproval to overturn that cancellation. So we have taken the step that was outlined in the law to cancel those loans, provide that economic assistance to Ukraine, and now Congress is welcome to take it up if they wish.
And if they do pass something, a resolution of disapproval, then it won't happen?
So I'm going to
Or
get
can
a
you
little.
just go ahead and do it
I'm going to
anyway?
get a little over my skis on what the law exactly calls for here. I think I would be surprised if Congress took that step, given the overwhelming bipartisan support in Congress for providing assistance. But we will follow the law.
Okay.
Sorry, when did you provide notification of Congress?
It was in the last few days. I don't know when. Matt seems to be aware of it becoming public. I'm not sure exactly when we made it, but it was steps that we were taking this week.
Okay.
Jenny, I thought you wanted.
Ukraine.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Such a generous colleague. So rare in this room. Yeah. Jenny, this
Thank
better be a
you.
Ukraine question or Jenny's going to come back.
Yes.
Right? Reclaim her time.
Yeah, Ukraine and North Korea. Zelensky said that 100,000 North Korean troops would be dispatched. And also Ukraine,
I'm sorry, Ukraine said that.
yeah, Zelensky said 100,000 North
yeah.
Korean troops would be dispatched. Also, the video shown by Ukraine showed several North Korean soldiers killed. How many casualties and wounded have North Korean soldiers suffered so far?
I don't have an assessment to offer from
The
here.
second question, the South Korean National Intelligence Service has announced that North Korean troops are being deployed to the Russian army and are participating in the war in Ukraine. It has also confirmed that North Korea is providing Russia with self-propelled artillery and rocket launchers. What do you think about this?
So I don't have a further assessment to offer today than what we've said in recent days about the deployment of North Korean soldiers to Kursk. We continue to see them in Kursk. We have seen some of them begin to take part in combat operations, and that makes them legitimate targets.
Thank you.
Anything else on Ukraine before we go? I said Ukraine. Jenny, go ahead. I'm happy to come to the Middle East, but I'm going to start with Jenny, who is next in the queue for Middle East.
On the Lebanon negotiations, I know Hochstein is traveling or may have arrived in Israel. Do you feel that you have closed the gaps? Are you optimistic about potentially securing a deal in the coming days?
We continue to make progress towards reaching a resolution. As you know, almost had additional meetings with the Speaker of the Lebanese Parliament before leaving Beirut for Israel. He's now going to Israel to discuss the outlines of a potential deal. We continue to believe a deal is possible. We continue to believe a deal is in the interest of all relevant parties, and we're going to continue to push to close one.
Where do things stand in terms of sustaining the LAF, them relocating to secure the border north of the Litani?
We have had important conversations with our Lebanese counterparts. That's one of the things, of course, that Amos has been discussing with them during his trip. And it's one of the things that we have been discussing separate from the trip with other partners in the region and with other partners in Europe about how people can provide financial contributions to the LAF, whether there are countries that can provide training to the LAF, whether there are countries that can provide other types of operational support to the LAF to ensure that it can perform the important role that it would have to play in ensuring UN Security Council Resolution 1701 is fully implemented.
And do you feel that those gaps have narrowed? Are they in a position, is it just political will at this point where?
I really don't think I should get into characterizing the negotiations or the parties or kind of negotiating in public, so I'm going to decline to answer that one. Let me go ahead and I'll come to you next, Michelle.
So Hezbollah's chief said they'd given feedback on the U.S. drafted ceasefire proposal. Is any of the feedback something you'd consider non-starter?
Again, I'm just not going to negotiate in public in any way about this issue.
Okay, and you said that they approved the track of indirect negotiations through the Speaker of the Parliament, but rejected the notion that Israel would be able to keep striking Hezbollah even after a truce is reached. Is that something you find workable?
I think, again, I'm going to rely on my previous answer. Just look, when it comes to any of the underlying provisions of a potential deal that we're still trying to get over the finish line, I don't think it helps for me to in any way comment on the shape of the deal in public when we have a special envoy who's in the region trying to negotiate those issues and get to the finish line now.
Okay, and the Senate is due to vote later today on 3 resolutions of disapproval that could block offensive weapons sales to Israel. Backers say that Israel must do more to protect civilians and that the U.S. should not be complicit in human rights violations. What's the administration's position on these resolutions?
So I would defer to the White House to speak to administration position. I don't know that they've issued a statement of administration policy, but when it comes to the underlying issue involved here, we continue to support Israel's right to defend itself. We continue to see a significant threat from Iran, both directly. We've seen Iran launch 2 rounds of attacks against Israel, and indirectly through its proxies in the region.
Okay, and then just on the UN Security Council vote this morning, your allies, France, which has hostages held in Gaza, and the UK both said the resolution firmly calls for the release of hostages. And to most people reading it, there's little difference between this language and what you abstained on in March. So why did the U.S. feel the need to block the resolution at this point?
So it's a good question. The resolution does call for the release of hostages. What it doesn't do is link the release of hostages to an immediate unconditional ceasefire. And we have made clear throughout this process that we cannot support a resolution that calls for an unconditional, immediate ceasefire and delinks it from the release of hostages. There are still 7 American citizens who are being held hostage in Gaza, and we are not going to walk away from them. And so we worked in good faith for several weeks to try to get to yes on this resolution, to try to get to a resolution that we can vote for. As you know, we have voted for a resolution in the Security Council resolution already this year that called for a ceasefire, but it called for a ceasefire with the release of hostages. And that is our position. We firmly believe in it because we want to see those hostages come home. And I would kind of turn the question around and ask, why is it that the countries pushing this resolution couldn't actually link the two? Why they wouldn't agree to link the ceasefire to the release of hostages? What is it to the release? What is it about the release of hostages that they wouldn't support when linked to a ceasefire? It seems to us plain common sense that if there's going to be a ceasefire, that Hamas shouldn't get to continue to hold the hostages. And so we want to see the two linked, and that will continue to be our position. We will continue to look for ways to find consensus with other countries on the UN Security Council, but because of that language, this resolution is not something we could support.
But as was pointed out earlier this morning, this resolution did contain a call for the release of hostages. What was defective about
the defective is that they were not linked. We believe it's important that you get a ceasefire. You get a ceasefire that secures the release of hostages. And we proposed a number of different formulations that would link the two, and that would call for a ceasefire that includes the release of hostages. And I don't understand. Hold on. Let me just say, I don't understand what could be objectionable about that language.
Well, right. No, but I guess the point is that other people don't understand what could be objectionable about the language that you just vetoed.
What is objectionable to us is that it calls for Israel
an immediate ceasefire and the immediate release.
It calls for an immediate ceasefire, and we don't think that Hamas. Because let's be clear about when people talk about an immediate ceasefire, what they mean is they mean for Israel to immediately stop fighting. You think Hamas is going to respect a UN Security Council resolution calling for the release of hostages? No. We don't think they are at all. So we think that if you're going to see, we think
why does it matter?
because we think they ought to be linked together. Because
So
then you get
in
international
other words,
support. Hold
if-
on, you can get international support, get the backing of every country in the world behind this proposal, behind this position, which is the one that the president outlined back in May. That we did get a Security Council resolution that we supported. I think that's an incredibly powerful way for the world to speak, and we're disappointed we couldn't do it here.
Well, yeah, okay, but so what would have been, I guess, would you prefer that the hostage release be put in the sentence before the ceasefire?
We think it needs to be linked together, that the ceasefire.
But how much more linked can they be?
You could say, so we put together a bunch of different, a bunch of alternative formulations of the language. I'll just give you one here: a ceasefire that secures the release of hostages. A ceasefire
And you proposed that language, and people
maybe not that exact language. We proposed a number of different formulations of the language that were not accepted, and I, for the life of me, can't understand why they weren't accepted if the parties backing the resolution really wanted to get to something that could pass the Security Council. Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of questions on Lebanon. Do you think that Israel has achieved its military goals there and they're ready to withdraw?
So I will let Israel speak to assessing its military objectives. I will say that on behalf of the United States, what we have seen is them accomplish a number of important objectives when you look at what they outlined at the opening of this conflict, when they said they wanted to go into Lebanon to clear out Hezbollah infrastructure close to the border. We have seen them over the course of the last couple months really be quite effective in clearing out Hezbollah infrastructure close to the border, which is why we believe we're in the place that we can get a diplomatic resolution now.